All right, we're back here. This is also under my sixth bullet point, what is beauty? And I want to finish this section very quickly with the concept of beauty in art music and when it started and what it might mean. I believe the beauty of the purity of sound of art music really became codified or solidified in the late 1500s, 1570s and 1580s in Italy, with some groups of female singers at the courts of Ferrara and others. Basically, the three of these really wealthy families in Italy had groups of singers who developed an extraordinary singing style with real virtuosity and beauty of sound. It's essentially the opera style of singing. But the purity of tone and the perfection of technique from that point on really became the hallmarks of art music, of classical music. To me, that's an extremely important turning point in the history of music, of all music, when it became a true art form and it became separated from a form of ethnic music or something like that, where the performers, in order to achieve the goal of that music, needed to have a beautiful sound and an extraordinary technique. So from that point on, the Concerto della Donna, the ladies of Ferrara and these other courts, we started to have an example, a standard for art music, and that is to have a beautiful sound and extraordinary technique. All right, I think that's very important to our concept of beauty here in music. So moving on, if we believe that structure and order are an important aspect of music, and I do believe this, as opposed to chaos and randomness, then we need to kind of understand how that works in music. So the next bullet point, number 7, is what I call the structure and order in music. And it's a really simple chart that shows how to understand how a piece of music is put together. So we can start at the very top with the whole work, all right, the composition. And this could be a multi-movement piece. Let's say it's a Beethoven symphony, for instance. It would have 4 movements in it. All right, so the entire work is the structure of the whole piece. From there, that can be broken down to the next level of what we would call a movement. Now, some pieces are single movement work, so you just put that at the top instead. So the whole work, with or without individual movements, it may or may not have those, but that's the larger structure. Then from there, we can break this down in this movement down into sections. Now, sections are typically large chunks of music that are fairly complete in and of themselves. They have very strong endings in most cases, cadences. They are often repeated. So if we think of a piece by Bach, take one of the movements from the cello suites, for instance, a minuet. The minuets are typically played with the first section that is played and repeated, and then a second section which is played and repeated. So it has 2 sections in it. All right, those 2 sections form a movement, a larger movement. That individual movement is part of the whole work. The cello suite is the whole work, the minuet is the movement, and the A section and the B section are the individual sections of it. All right, from there we can break down those sections into phrases. And the phrases don't have to be tonal music phrases. They could be avant-garde modern music, but most music has segments, little groups, kind of like a sentence in prose. And these little segments are fairly well fleshed out ideas that make sense in and of themselves. They're usually melodic in nature with a specific rhythmic and harmonic underpinning. And they have an ending, a cadence of some point. All right. Breaking down a phrase, we could break that into smaller little pieces, and those little pieces could be called motifs, for lack of a better word. We do use that word in music, a motive, but it could also be a gesture, a little fragment, something like that. And these little motifs are often sequenced, not always, but sometimes, the motive moves up. So he played a few da-da-da-dum, 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 da-da-da-dum. So you can have these little motives moving higher or lower in time, and they can make up a phrase. Then from the motive, let me keep moving, the smallest level, the lowest level, would be the individual note and rhythm in music. So you take an individual note and you put those together into little recognizable chunks or groups, you have a motive. And then you take a few of those motives and you string those together, and that would build a phrase. And then from the phrase, you take several of those and string those together, and it would form a section. You take a few sections and put those together, it would form a movement. You put a few movements together, it forms the whole work. All right. I include this because I think it's really vital in understanding how pop music is very different than art music. Okay, so let's move on to our next thing, some of the main genres in music, and how we categorize these. First off, I think there's really only 3 primary genres, and then there's a million subgenres underneath that. The 3 primary genres that I see, first off, are folk and ethnic music. And that is music of a specific region and a specific group of people. So Celtic music, music of the British Isles, for instance, Native American music. These would be specific groups of people in a certain place. The music is usually very simple in nature, and it's usually designed around storytelling. And it's usually using the instruments found in that specific place or created in that specific region. The next category is popular or commercial music, and I think it varies or is vastly different than folk or ethnic music. Has a very different function for one most of the time, a different purpose. Popular music would be, or commercial music is maybe a better term for it, is music that's really designed as a commodity, and that commodity is designed to be sold, and that's its primary function, is to be sold, and so we measure its success on its rate of sales. So who are the most successful pop musicians of all time? It's pretty easy. I don't know if you could argue with these 3, but I would go with Elvis, the Beatles, and Michael Jackson. Be a pretty easy trifecta right there. And why are they so successful? Because they sold the most product. That's why they're huge. Okay. The other category, main genre of music, is art or classical music. And this is music designed, as we've talked about already, to function really just as the beauty of sound by itself. Okay, so there are 3 primary genres of music, subcategories, no need to go there. All right, so now we need some kind of a system for evaluating the quality of a piece of music. Okay, how do we do this? It's not easy. Actually, I came up with a number of bullet points, and I thought I could go forever coming up with different subcategories within this, but I stuck with just a few. And so here they are. First off is uniqueness within the parameters of that which is already accepted as normal. It's a big sentence in some ways. Uniqueness within the parameters of that which is already accepted as normal. So if you create something that's way outside of the norm here, chances are it will not be considered a good piece of music because it's too unusual for the norm, the standard that people are used to when it comes to, say, a pop song. So if in a pop song you create a work that is 25 minutes long and it modulates to many different keys and it uses atonal sounds and so on, it's going to be too far outside of their experience and it probably won't be considered good. So it'll be considered poor. All right, next. I think another way to evaluate the quality of music is the purity or quality of the individual notes and rhythms in that piece of music. How good is the sound? Now, as classical guitarists, our sound is paramount. I mean, if you don't have a good sound, you've lost half the battles already. If you don't produce a good sound, who's going to want to listen? So this is hugely important. So I believe we can evaluate the quality of a piece of music based on how good the sound is. All right. Then, hang in there. I'm going to cut this video off right here, just under 10 minutes, and let's move on to the next one. See you there.